And for today's fun fact, I was actually part of a professional meeting called the Southeast Deer Study Group, and that's a collection of biologists and researchers, graduate students. And at that meeting, they asked the audience, and they had clickers to respond, do you think the public, the hunting public, thinks that there is a difference between baiting and supplemental feeding? And the overwhelming response was that no, people don't see a difference. So that's going to be the topic of today's conversation. So we have a guest here with us today. His name is Ryan Swanson. He's the accountant for Anilogics. He's also a diehard bow hunter. So let's just start off with talking about your hunting experience so far this year and what you're going to expect for this weekend.
Well, I've been hunting down in northeast Nebraska in Knox County, and we've been getting a lot of doe movement late in the day and some small bucks walk by, but we have 4 shooters on camera, so hopefully this weekend we'll see one of those shooters in daylight and we can put one on the ground. Baiting in Nebraska, we can actually have bait 200 yards from our stand, so if we decide to hunt over the bait, we can't. We get to take out 60 days prior. So
yeah, and that's one of the things we'll talk about. Every state is different. You really got to keep up with the regulations. It seems like they change daily, so you really got to keep up to it. So we'll just go back and forth here. Ryan's going to ask me some questions, and I'll respond. And Taylor, you can stop us if there's any questions from the audience.
Okay, Tim. What is the difference between baiting and supplemental feeding?
So the difference to me is the objective of placing that product out. For baiting, the objective is to harvest an animal over that product. And with supplemental feeding, the objective is to increase the available nutrition to that animal. So there is instances where a bait can be a healthy feed product, but ultimately if you're trying to harvest an animal using that site, that's going to be a baited site. And that's just how I feel about it. Like I said, you got to look at your state's regulations to know the difference.
Sure. Okay. Why do different states have different regulations when it comes to using feed or minerals?
I think what it boils down to is the local culture. You look at Texas, for example. They've been feeding for many years, and it's just kind of ingrained into the culture. And then there's places like Illinois where it's been not allowed for many years now. I think it's over 10 years. So the culture has changed away from using any of those products by most of the people in that state. And then it ultimately boils down to the opinions of the biologists that set the rules with the state agencies. So if you want to try and get some change in your state, you're going to have to start at the grassroots level and build a lot of support for it from local cultures so that you can change the minds of the biologists in that area. So.
Okay. Who should you call to determine if the product is legal or not in your state?
So the first call that I would make would be to the local warden. They ultimately will decide on whether or not a product is going to be legal in your area. You know, the temptation is there to call the feed company, but they really don't know how each warden is going to consider each product. So the call to make is to the local warden.
Okay. What states have allowed full use of feed and mineral products?
So the two that come to mind right offhand are Texas and Kansas. Those are known as states where you can hunt over feed products. But a sleeper in terms of what states allow it is Ohio. There's actually been a lot of really nice bucks shot in Ohio, and that's a state where you can hunt over feed. But it's kind of weird, like in Kansas and Ohio, it's allowed on private land, but not on public land. So it's interesting that there's a difference, and it's hard for me to explain why they do that, but I think they're afraid of people like putting product out and saying, well, this is my deer that comes to this, so that's why they don't do it on public land. But those are the big ones that come to mind as far as states that allow it. And then the opposite end of that would be, what are the big states that do not allow it? And the two that come to mind are Illinois and New York, where those products are not legal at any time of the year.
I don't think Montana is either.
Yeah, Montana, that's another one as well.
For our Minnesota viewers, what are the laws here in Minnesota?
Here in Minnesota, some people think that you can't use it during the season, but actually you can, as long as you completely remove the product for 10 days, and then you can hunt that area. If you're not going to hunt in that area, then you can have the product out year-round. So it's still legal to use in Minnesota, even during the hunting season.
We did just get a question from Brad in Inconville. If you're going hunting, where and why?
Okay, so I have a wedding this weekend, so I'm not going hunting. I wish that I was, but if I was going hunting, I would be going to Nebraska. I share a lease with Ryan here, and I would be going there because there are deer on camera that came out in daylight within the last 2 weeks that are, in my mind, killable. That means they were near our stand in daylight hours, so that's why I would go there. Is that what you were thinking too?
Yep. Do you think banning feed products actually helps prevent the spread of diseases?
I actually do not, and there's two different camps on this. You know, the people that think that disease is going to be spread by those feed sources, and the other camp that thinks that it isn't. And the making it illegal in a state doesn't actually help, because what you end up doing is the people that are doing it illegally are fewer than the people that would be doing it normally if it was allowed. So look at Illinois, for instance. Last year they had 563 citations for illegal feed and mineral use. So people are still doing it. I mean, and it's been illegal for many years. So what's occurring, if you believe that disease is spread at a feed or mineral site, there's fewer of those on the landscape. They're still on the landscape. So there's fewer of those places, so there's more concentration at those limited areas. So ultimately, I think it would be better to spread out the ability to feed throughout the whole state so that the deer are not concentrating these illegal mineral and feed sites.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I had for now.
All right. If anybody has any questions from the audience, we can go ahead and keep it open for a few minutes. I just had some text messages of some big deer that were on their feet recently. People using feeders here in the state of Minnesota and not hunting near them. They've gotten some really good action. So starting to get some beans out of the fields around here. So there's starting to be less opportunities for deer to feed where they have been earlier on in the year. So you can start to target those limiting feed resources. What else is going on? I've talked to some guys that are wanting to get their corn out, but it's a little too high in moisture right now. So they're going to keep the corn in for a while. So I've seen, well, in Nebraska, how much of the crops were out down there, would you say?
Probably 10%, 10 to 20%. I'd say it's about, 2 weeks ahead of it is in southwest Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
A little drier down there. More sandy soil.
Yeah, so if we don't have anything else, we'll just wrap it up right there. You can still leave comments after the live feed, and we'll respond to any questions you guys have, but I guess we'll see you next week.